You know how sometimes you hear a headline and think, okay, that sounds important, but what does it really mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where we're starting today. We're diving into this story about the trade tensions between China and the U.S. hitting Boeing,
Right.
and what this reported order from China to its airlines actually signals. It feels like, well, something pretty big is brewing.
It definitely does. And, while the immediate focus is on Boeing and the airlines, this really opens up a window into the complexities of global trade
Yeah,
and how these high-level disputes sort of trickle down and affect major industries.
absolutely. So the core of this, as we understand it from reports Bloomberg originally covered by CBS News, is that China has apparently told its domestic airlines pretty much point blank,
Yeah.
stop taking delivery of Boeing jets. But it doesn't stop there.
Right. No, it's more than that.
It's also about halting purchases of like parts and other essential bits and pieces from U.S. aviation companies. We're digging into this to try and make sense of the moving pieces for everyone listening.
Right. And to understand why this is happening now, you really have to look at the bigger picture,
Okay.
the ongoing trade back and forth between the two countries. Just recently, both sides they've escalated things with increased tariffs.
Ah, the tariffs.
Exactly. China upped its tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. And that, you might remember, matches the level the U.S. had placed on Chinese imports.
Right, right.
And in some cases, those U.S. tariffs can actually go even higher, up to maybe 145%. So the economic temperature has definitely been turned up.
Okay, so let's zoom in on this Boeing situation then. It's not just like a suggestion from China, is it? It sounds more like a directive.
That's the indication from the reports, yeah. It's being presented as an instruction, from the Chinese government to its airlines.
Wow.
It's a pretty clear signal.
Hmm.
Don't accept any more Boeing aircraft that have been ordered, and also put a stop to buying new parts and components from U.S. aviation suppliers.
And what's been Boeing's reaction to all this? Have
Yes.
they said anything publicly?
Well, so far, Boeing has chosen not to comment officially on these specific reports.
Okay.
However, the financial markets, they reacted pretty quickly. Boeing's stock price saw a dip around 1.6% right after this news broke.
Ooh, okay. That immediate market response, that tells you something, doesn't it?
It does. It tells you that investors are taking this seriously and they see, potential implications for Boeing's business.
It definitely suggests there's maybe more to this than just a minor hiccup. Now, what's the direct link between this order and those increased tariffs you mentioned? It feels like there has to be a clear connection.
Oh, absolutely. The Bloomberg report spells it out pretty directly. Those new 125% tariffs on U.S. goods. They would essentially more than double the price of American-made aircraft and their components for Chinese airlines.
Double the price. Wow.
Yeah. And when you're talking about something as expensive as a commercial jet, I mean, a price hike of that magnitude makes them, well, to use Bloomberg's term, unaffordable.
Unaffordable. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's really a fundamental economic thing at play, When the cost goes up that dramatically, the demand is likely to just drop.
That makes perfect sense. So it's not just about making some kind of political statement. There's a very real impact on the bottom line for these airlines.
Exactly.
So how many Boeing planes are we actually talking about here that might be affected by this?
According to that Bloomberg report, which cites data from a group called Aviation Flights Group, there are around 10 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft
Okay, 10.
that were apparently scheduled to be delivered to Chinese airlines. And these aren't small, unknown carriers either. We're talking about major players like China Southern Airlines,
Right.
Air China, and Xiamen Airlines. These are significant airlines in the Chinese market.
10 planes. I mean, it might not sound like a massive number on its own for a global giant like Boeing.
Yeah.
But we need to see that in context, right?
Exactly. You need the context.
What does that number mean for Boeing's overall business?
Well, if you look at Boeing's own report
Mm.
from April 8th, just before this news really broke,
Mhm.
they announced they had delivered a total of 130 aircraft in the first quarter of this year.
Okay, 130 total.
And importantly, over 100 of those were 737 jets, the very model reportedly affected by this Chinese order.
Ah, okay. So over 100 of the 130 were 737s.
Right. So while 10 planes might seem small in isolation, it actually represents a notable portion of their deliveries for a key product line
Yeah.
in a really major international market.
Mm.
Any disruption there is going to have an impact.
And this isn't just some dry economic story playing out in reports, is it? I mean, we even heard from former President Trump about this. What did he have to say?
Yes, that's right. He He took to his Truth Social platform, and he stated that China just reneged on the big Boeing deal, saying that they will not take possession of fully committed aircraft.
Hmm. So he's weighing in, confirming the reports from his perspective.
Exactly. It adds another layer to the story, confirms the news from a significant political voice, and it reinforces the idea that this is definitely seen as a direct consequence of the whole trade situation.
It sounds pretty, well, pretty cut and dried then. But are there any potential loopholes here? Could some of these planes still end up in China despite this order?
That's an interesting point. The Bloomberg report does actually bring up a possibility for some continued deliveries.
Oh.
They mentioned that if the payment and all the necessary paperwork for certain aircraft were finalized before this latest round of tariff hikes happened earlier this month,
Ah,
then those specific planes might still be delivered. So it's not necessarily a complete immediate shutdown for every single Boeing jet destined for China.
okay.
There could be some existing agreements, that might still be honored.
That adds a bit of complexity, doesn't it? It's rarely as simple as just a complete stop.
Never is, really.
Now, stepping back even further, we know this Boeing situation isn't happening in a vacuum. What else is going on in this wider trade war that we should maybe keep in mind?
Yeah, that's crucial. This action against Boeing has to be viewed as, part of the much larger and increasingly intricate trade relationship or perhaps trade dispute right now.
Hmm. Right.
The CBS News report touches on several other elements, like the ongoing lack of really significant tariff negotiations between the U.S. and China.
Okay, so talks aren't really happening.
Not in a major way, it seems. We've also heard statements from President Trump about potential tariff exemptions, though the specifics of those are still pretty unclear.
Right.
Additionally, the U.S. government has been launching investigations into imports from China in key tech sectors, think semiconductors and pharmaceuticals.
Hmm.
And there's even been talk about potentially pausing tariffs on automobiles. So all of this just paints a picture of a relationship under, well, considerable strain,
Yeah.
where trade is definitely being used as a significant tool, or maybe even a weapon.
So when you look at all of this together, what are the main things that really stand out to you? What should we really be paying attention to?
Well, I think the key takeaways are pretty clear. China's reported instruction to its airlines: halt Boeing deliveries, stop buying U.S. aviation parts. It looks very much like a direct response to these escalating trade tensions,
Especially the tariffs.
especially the recent increase in tariffs, yeah.
Yeah.
And this poses a significant immediate challenge for Boeing. It impacts their delivery numbers
Right.
and potentially their future market share in China,
Right.
which is, let's face it, a huge market.
A massive market. And okay, for someone listening who maybe isn't directly involved in the aviation industry or, following the day-to-day of U.S.-China trade, why should they care about this? What's the broader relevance here?
That's a great question. I think this situation really underscores just how interconnected our global economy is.
Yeah.
These aren't just abstract political moves happening somewhere far away. They have tangible consequences for major industries like aerospace,
Okay.
which in turn affects jobs, it affects supply chains, even the travel industry
Mm-hmm.
that, many people rely on.
Right. So it ripples outward.
Exactly. It's a reminder that these big international trade disputes can have very real-world impacts, even if they seem kind of distant from our daily lives.
Mm.
It brings those big ideas down to earth,
Yeah,
know?
that's a really important point. It definitely brings it down to earth. So thinking about the future then, what's the big question that this whole situation brings to mind for you? What are you going to be watching to see how it unfolds?
Hmm. For me, I think the really big question is about the long-term strategic implications. Will this move by China actually accelerate its own ambitions in the aerospace sector?
Ah, like developing their own planes more quickly.
Exactly. Particularly, developing companies like Comac, their domestic aircraft manufacturer, and trying to reduce their reliance on Western manufacturers like Boeing or Airbus.
Okay, so that's one path.
That's one path. Or will there eventually be some kind of de-escalation in these trade tensions that allows for a resumption of these deliveries? Will things cool down?
Right, so self-reliance versus reconciliation, basically.
Sort of. The global aviation market is just vast and incredibly complex, and shifts like this, they could have really lasting effects on competition, on innovation, the whole industry, really.
That's definitely something to keep an eye on then. It really feels like this is a story that's still developing, and the ripple effects, like you said, could be pretty significant. Thanks for breaking it all down with me today.
It's a pleasure, yeah. Understanding the connections in these global events is, well, it's pretty crucial, isn't it?